Welcome back to our video series, 52 Weeks of Personal Injury. As always, I'm Chase Elleby. This is Joel Williams with Williams Elleby, and today we're coming to you with week 32 with the age-old question of should I settle my case or should I file a lawsuit? Joel, I think we get asked that question probably every single case. So what are the factors to consider when trying to decide whether or not you want to settle or file a lawsuit?
Yeah, so I agree, man. This is probably the most common question we get asked by our clients, probably multiple times a day. But I would say the first question is pretty obvious. Is your pre-suit offer enough?
Right.
Is it enough to not necessarily, make you over the moon happy, but satisfied that you're being treated fairly, that it pays all of your bills, that it puts some in your pocket that fairly compensates you for the pain and the suffering and the trouble you've been through. And if it is, great, you settle the case and you get your money now. If it's not, then you may want to consider filing a lawsuit. But I think the answer to that question is different for different people because everybody has different risk tolerances.
Right, yeah. Sometimes you'll know right off the bat on the offer that it's 100% not going to be enough.
Yeah.
I always said, a good pre-suit offer is the one that kind of makes you think, like, all right, what are the pros and cons of whether or not I should accept now or file suit, right? So, to your point, like if you know that it's a nothing offer, you're not going to get it done, then it kind of makes your decision easy. Which brings us kind of to the next point, is you should always ask yourself, or ask us rather, and we'll tell you, is if we think, filing suit will actually increase the offer. Because offers, no one case is alike. Every offer is always different. There's different variables go into consideration. And most of the time when you're dealing with an insurance company, depending on which insurance company it is, when you file a lawsuit, it's going to go to a new adjuster or a different litigation adjuster. And that adjuster is almost always going to have more authority, meaning more money to settle a case right off the bat than, say the pre-suit adjuster.
Yeah, and we see that more often than not with certain insurance companies, and maybe this varies from state to state, but in Georgia at least, we see that with Progressive quite often, where we get some garbage offer pre-suit, we file suit, and then all of a sudden the offer doubles or becomes much more reasonable than it was before. So there can be advantages of that, of filing the lawsuit, depending on what state you're in, but your attorney in your state should be pretty familiar with the tendencies of insurance companies to increase or stay the same after a lawsuit's been filed.
Right.
I think another thing that people have to ask themselves are, what are the specifics of your own financial situation, right? So if you file a lawsuit, it's going to take time. You have to file it, you have to serve the defendant, you have to go through the discovery process, take a bunch of depositions, engage in written discovery, maybe go to mediation, wait until the court tells you you're ready to try the case and all that. Sometimes that process can take a year to two and maybe even 3 or 4 years if appeals are involved. So it does take time. So you have to ask yourself the question, how bad do I need the money now, or am I willing to wait, however long the case takes, in order to try to get a fair amount. And that can put people in a difficult situation sometimes, especially if they really need the money and the insurance company's offer is very low.
Right, and it goes to kind of what we said initially, like this decision is personal to every single client, and it differs from every single client. I've had clients accept way less than what I think a case is really worth, but they didn't really have a choice because of their specific situation, where otherwise I've had clients not accept an offer that I thought was a great offer, all things considered, because they're willing to, play the long game. I think another important thing to consider when you are trying to determine whether or not you want to accept a settlement offer before filing suit or filing a lawsuit is, are there any variables that will impact your case once we get into litigation? And things like that are, one thing that jumps out to mind is if you have a checkered past with a lot of arrests for things like fraud, writing bad checks, anything that can be used against you to kind of chip away at your credibility. Generally, insurance companies and adjusters aren't going to dig into the weeds on the pre-suit side of cases because they just quite frankly don't have enough time. So that stuff isn't really going to come out. But when you file a lawsuit, all that stuff's going to come out. Same with any pre-existing conditions. Say you hurt your neck and back in a wreck. They're going to know about that time you went to the doctor, a year or two before and had neck or back injuries. which could change the value of your case. We talked earlier about, sometimes the value goes up because it goes to a new adjuster when the lawsuit's filed. Well, if you have things in the case or in the file that the insurance company doesn't know about, but they're going to know about when you file suit, then that value could go down, right? Exactly. So that's another thing to consider, because there's certainly times where, we get a decent offer. It's like, hey, chances are things aren't going to get much better if we file a lawsuit. But, still at the end of the day, it's up to the client to decide, whether or not that's something they want to risk or not.
Yeah.
So
I think another thing that a client should consider also, and hopefully they considered this before they hired the lawyer, but is the lawyer that you have experienced in litigation? Because believe it or not, there are lawyers out there that call themselves trial lawyers who have never tried a case. There are plenty of personal injury lawyers who have never put a case in suit. It's just not what they do. It's not part of their firm's business model. So if you're going to need to file a lawsuit, you probably want to make sure that your lawyer is competent and capable of filing that lawsuit and handling the litigation process in the proper way, in a thorough way, and in an efficient way that's going to help, again, increase the value of your case once it's in litigation. If you have a lawyer that's never filed a lawsuit, that's never taken a deposition, that's never tried a case, that's a tough spot to be in if you get a bad settlement offer pre-suit.
yeah, it's a tough spot to be in too, because especially like in Georgia, where the legal community and what we do is relatively small. So insurance companies, defense firms, in-house defense firms, they know the firms that will try cases. They know the firms that aren't going to try cases. So if they know that the lawyer has a reputation for, fighting for their client, trying to get max value on the case, and is willing to try the case, then you'll start to see where the offers are going to be more reasonable, because you have to put their feet to the fire. Because at the end of the day, all plaintiffs can do is ask for money up until we get to the point of a jury trial when the jury awards a certain amount of damages. So that basically means we can't do anything other than go to trial and get the verdict. So
yeah, and prepare the case so that the people that are writing the checks on the other side know that we mean business.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think last but not least, to sort of hit the last thing on this topic of things to consider whether or not to file suit. I know we talked about the time component of it, but there's also a cost associated with filing a suit, right? You got the filing fees, you got the deposition costs for experts, you might have exhibits, you might have to actually hire the experts and things like that. So there's a lot of times when you're kind of breaking down the dollars and cents of a case, you have to consider, okay, well, we might be able to settle this case for Y now, but if we file suit and we settle it for X, you're going to have all these expenses, so the net amount that you might get is not really much more than what you would get if you were to accept it now. So your lawyer should definitely have those conversations with you to lay it all out so you know kind of what you're getting yourself into.
100%, because it makes a big difference if, say, without filing a lawsuit, maybe you've got $500 in out-of-pocket expenses.
Yeah.
Versus if you have to try your case, maybe you've got $50,000 of out-of-pocket expenses. That just means that in order for you to net the same amount out of your recovery, you're going to have to get at least $49,500 more in our hypothetical at trial just to get the same amount that you have gotten pre-suit.
Right.
So, but you can also, your attorney should be able to tell you, all cases aren't going to cost $50,000 in expenses to get to trial. Maybe it costs $3,000 or $4,000. So in that situation, maybe it's worth it to roll the dice. But the only other thing that I can think of that, for this video's purposes, that people should probably consider is, do you know the full extent of your damages prior to the deadline that's set by the law in your state when you have to file the lawsuit? So assuming there's enough insurance, assuming there's enough money to recover from, if you're still treating and it gets close to the time to file the lawsuit, you may not be able to settle the case for an amount with the full knowledge of what your damages are. Right? So I know in Tennessee, for example, the statute of limitations on personal injury cases is 1 year.
It's quick.
A lot of our clients are still treating after 1 year, and they don't even know whether they're going to have surgery or how long they're going to treat, or if it's going to be a lifelong injury. In Georgia, it's 2 years in most cases. But if you find yourself in that situation, it may not be in your best interest to even try to settle it pre-suit. You might just need to put it in suit.
Right.
Because the case can always settle after you file a lawsuit, because some people just assume that once you file a lawsuit, you're going to trial. That's not the case at all. Most cases do settle before trial, and a lot of those cases settle after a lawsuit's been filed. So you may have to just go ahead and file the lawsuit to preserve your ability to pursue it later, and to give you time to get a full appreciation of what your total damages are.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, because we get that question asked a lot. Like, okay, once I file a lawsuit, can I still settle it? Absolutely. You can settle the case at any time. Cases have settled a day after the lawsuit's filed. Cases have settled while the jury's out deliberating. And any time in between. So, yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that's it, right?
Yep.
Okay, I'll try to sign off. I'm not real good at it. But if you like the video, please hit the like button. Don't forget to subscribe to our page. And if you have any questions or comments, go ahead and put them in the comment section below, and we'll try to get to all of them. Other than that, we will see you guys next week for week 33 of our series.